All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Mike Lynch, reporter with the Adirondack Explorer, and I'm with Jeff Nadler today. Jeff is a respected photographer who lives just south of the Adirondack Park, but spends a lot of time up here photographing wildlife, nature, and most recently, northern lights over the last year and a half. Today, we're going to talk with him about some of his experiences photographing some of the, wildlife and northern lights, and learn about some processes for photo for viewing northern lights. Jeff has been with the Explorer since the beginning, and he's had many photos appear in our magazine and many covers. In the most recent edition, he had a collage of northern lights, and then before that, in the edition before that, he had some great bear photographs. Um, so Jeff, tell us a little bit about your background in photography and how long you've been doing it, and what are some of your focus areas.
Sure, Mike. Let me first say thanks for inviting me. Thanks to the Adirondack Explorer staff for having me here, and look forward to giving you some background on photography. So my primary focus, people may recall, was and still is probably bird photography. Started really early, family camping. Um, Introduced myself to loons, osprey, heron, and songbirds in the woods. Eventually, I traveled to spring migrant spots in the Midwest and Florida and got together with other bird photographers and learned skills through a bunch of bird photography groups. The Adirondacks, as many know, remains my favorite location for just about everything, including birds, and loons are still a favorite. Years ago, I started marketing all of this work for publication use only, education, conservation, editorial. I never really had a great interest in selling my work as prints at craft fairs and art fairs and stuff like that. I really enjoy the publication aspect of things. So a loon, if you've got a photo of that, would be a perfect example of how I started and continued to photograph birds.
So here's one of Jeff's loon photos he got with the two chicks on the background there. Jeff, can you
So,
tell us a little bit about this photograph?
sure. So, with loons, you end up finding out that loons have individual personalities and their tolerance for people varies. Quite amazing. Some lakes, you get out on the shore, and the minute you're just standing there, the loons have lower tolerance for people. And I've always avoided those. Going to lakes that probably had more boats, more people that they got used to. And this particular loon, I won't mention the name of the lake because it's special to me, but these loons, the chicks would come right up to me next to my canoe. I have a few friends that also visit this lake, and this is a great place in the Adirondacks for loons.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. So, over the years, you've been known for your photographs of boreal birds. How did you get started on that, and what did you accomplish?
So going back to the family camping beginnings, I think we were camping at Brown Track Pond in my family with kids. We did the nearby walk over to Furd's Bog, which is a boreal wetland. And a couple of Canada jays, they were called gray jays back then, landed in a tree right next to us. And they were inquisitive, and they were looking for handouts of food, which we didn't know at the time. I was so in awe with those tame birds that I looked more into the boreal habitat that they like, and learned about the other birds that are favor spruce and tamarack trees in the Adirondacks. And honestly, most of the Adirondacks are northern hardwoods. The boreal forest, which is more common in Canada, in Alaska just touches different spots in the Adirondack. So I ended up trying to specialize in the boreal birds, and quite a few were used for publication. The Probably the rarest for me and not often seen anymore is the American three-toed woodpecker that I happened to photograph also at Furd's Bog, but years later. The most difficult access for me, and I was invited to join twice. Staff at the DEC biologist there was uh, going for spruce grouse up in the dense woods up by Tupper Lake. So I pretty much got all the boreal bird species photographed, and enjoyed having my photos used by various conservation organizations, not only in the Adirondacks, but across the country.
Okay, so you want to? I'll show some
So,
photos.
yeah, there's a Canada jay and a boreal chickadee. I think you have a photo up to share. This is a boreal chickadee. One of this I did photograph up by Little Tupper Lake, Round Lake area between Long Lake and Tupper Lake. The spruce grouse I would not have got on my own. I really was thankful for the research biologists that were studying spruce grouse. There's another gray jay flying at me.
So, Jeff, what did you use to photograph this bird here? What
Um,
equipment?
so I usually bring a variety of equipment for flight shots like that. I use a smaller lens so I can hand hold it. Well, I had my bigger lens on a tripod, and the key to getting it motion there is a very fast shutter speed. So these gray jays were, or Canada jays, I should say, were flying back and forth across the road. They're looking for handouts and also anything else, natural food. So I love this shot actually.
Yeah, that's a great shot. So, the next topic I think is going to be a favorite for a lot of people, and it's actually how I got to recognize your work.
Oh, okay.
I remember a decade or so ago, seeing these amazing videos and photographs of a bull moose in the Moose River Plains. Um, and those photographs I think appeared in various publications. And but I was wondering, tell us about that experience. What was that like? I mean, how many, people in the Adirondacks don't get to experience seeing a bull moose like that very often. Tell us a little bit more about that.
I will. And actually the first experience was an unbelievable encounter. So I found out about the bull moose from a resident of Inlet who spends a lot of time in the Moose River Plains, and I know him, and he shared with me that a bull moose was being seen regularly at this pond. It was Helldiver Pond in the Moose River Plains. Um, so he said dawn, and it would only feed for like 20 minutes. So it's a long drive for me. So I ended up going up the night before and setting up camp. And I carried my kayak to the water so it would be there early in the morning. It was about a 0.3 mile trail. Got it all situated, got back to my campsite, which was right near the parking lot. And I got to tell you, the mosquitoes were so unbearable that I ended up, I ate dinner in the car, and I ended up taking a book and going in the tent early, looking forward to getting up early anyways for the moose. Well, the lights dimming, and I'm reading, and I start hearing distant sounds in the woods of like branches moving. And it got closer and closer, and really close next to me. So I unzip the tent, I stick my head out, and a bull moose is standing like 5 feet from me, towering over me next to the tent. I did not think this is how my first encounter was going to be. Camera stuff was in the car, probably didn't matter because it was sort of dark. The moose then continued, walked past my car and down the access road. I was like shaking. It was incredible, but it was a little bit scary having a 1,000-pound animal standing right next to me. I was wondering, was that it? Because it was walking away from the pond. Was I thinking that was it? No photos? But went down to the pond in the morning, in the dark, as the light came at dawn. There was the moose along the shore feeding. I didn't even get in my kayak because it was so close. Started taking pictures, and immediately it started raining, and the camera was hard to focus. So, and then the moose left. So that was an incredible encounter, but I wanted more. I ended up going back two more times during better weather. This time the moose was further out on the pond, and I paddled out an incredible encounter all alone again with the moose. After the third time, word of mouth got out about the moose, and it became a public attraction. And on my fourth time, I went there. The parking lot was full. There were 19 people standing on the shore, and the moose was not to be seen. So, very, very grateful to the person that shared the moose. Incredible encounter. I've seen many moose before in family vacations in Maine and New Hampshire, but that was really my first Adirondack moose, and a huge bull at that.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. I've seen a few moose in the Adirondacks, but nothing that compares to that. Usually you see some female moose, but you know, very rare do you see a bull moose.
You
Um,
want to show the
for that,
video?
yeah, for
Um,
that, I'm going to show the video right here so people can get a feel for what Jeff experienced.
this video was from the second encounter when I was actually out on my kayak at the opposite end of the pond, and I was close. Moose was eating pond vegetation the whole time.
How long did you view it for?
It seemed for me and for others that did get to see it, the moose was out for like 20-minute to half-hour sessions to feed, and then would go back in the woods. This was, I think it was July, so the rack was still in velvet, but sizable.
And here, I'll show a couple photos you captured of it also.
The nice thing about this moose at Helldiver Pond was, even though the Moose River Plains are a challenge to get to and the pond was remote, enough people went that got to enjoy seeing it, and really get to view and study a moose in our Adirondacks.
All right, we've got one more photo.
This was, yeah, I think the rack you can see is a little bit smaller in this one. This might have been the second visit, but the fact that it's not raining means it wasn't the first.
So, what are some other memorable wildlife experiences you've had in the Adirondacks as a photographer?
So if we stick with moose, um, I've actually had 8 moose encounters in the Adirondacks. Starting with that Helldiver moose, the others were either again in a boat on a kayak or canoe, walking, or even driving. So pretty fortunate to have seen 8. Um, I do have trail cams that record moose, but none of them really led to any of those 8 encounters. So, the first one, the helldiver moose, was because of someone told me about it. The rest were, on my own. Besides moose, I've counted. I've had 10 black bear encounters in the Adirondacks. Again, combination of walking, hiking, driving in a boat. Um, Lots of river otter encounters. I never realized how common they were on the different wilderness lakes that I paddle. I've had I've been out on back roads birding and coyotes popping out of the woods right onto the road. Deer, raccoon, bald eagles, all the Adirondack wildlife that one would hope to see. And it's not necessarily easy. Those black bear encounters, not one of them did I ever plan on it or go looking for it. They just happened. To actually try to go see a black bear has been a challenge.
Great. I'm going to show a river otter photo you took here.
And this river otter was actually on Helldiver Pond in the back area. This was one of the visits when I kept going back for the moose and did not see it, but the otter kept me company.
That's a great shot.
Thank you.
Here, we'll get to see one of your eagle photographs here.
This is around Great Sacandaga Lake area. When I years ago when I started doing photography, eagles were actually just being reintroduced, and there weren't many. And now we almost take them for granted, especially in the winter when a lot come down from Canada and Maine for open water. So there are a lot of eagles in the Adirondack area along open water in the wintertime.
Great. So I think I'm going to change the topic here from wildlife to northern lights, which has been giving us a treat over the last year and a half. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiencing photographing them? What's it been like, the last year and a half? We've had this solar cycle, peak in the solar cycle, so we've been seeing them more. Yeah, tell me a little bit about your experiences.
I will. I'll tell you the beginning. So, for everyone, there's pluses and minuses to using Facebook, and I've experienced both. But way back, one of my photographer friends that I know from birding posted a picture of the Northern Lights, and I didn't know much about the Northern Lights then, and I was in awe. So I asked him about it, and then about a month later, he sent me a message saying tonight was the night that Northern Lights were possible. It was March 23rd, 2023. And he even suggested some places to go, which I did. And I got there, and there was this magnificent green arc across Great Sacandaga Lake. And just seeing it was beautiful. But after about an hour, nothing changed. And I said, okay. And I started walking back to my car. It was cold. I looked back. I don't know why I looked back, but all of a sudden there's these huge red pillars shooting up from above the green arc. And I didn't know um, it was a substorm, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, but I didn't know what a substorm was at the time. So instantly set my tripod back up and started taking pictures. And that was the start of being hooked on the Northern Lights for me. Back in 2023, with the sun at its solar max and churning up a lot of charged particles, this is the time when we get more Northern Lights than usual. And in 2023, I think I photographed them 10 times, still not knowing as much as I do now. In 2024, having learned a lot more about the Northern Lights and how to go look for them in the Adirondacks, I photographed them 24 times, and the Explorer used a collage to show some of those 24. But again, these 24, these aren't like night-long Northern Lights. There's something called a substorm, and it might last 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and you have to sort of have knowledge about them, anticipate when they're going to happen, and be out there ready for them, which I did, not all the time, but I had a pretty good success rate.
Great. So I'll show a video that Jeff made right now.
And I'll explain as you're showing the video that this is a time lapse, that night photography, the video of cameras usually can't record adequately the light. So what photographers do is they take photos every few seconds and then combine them into a movie or video. So this speeds things up more than what you see, but it's the only way of really capturing them with adequate lighting, because each individual photo is a longer exposure to gather light, anywhere from 3 to 6 seconds or so. This is a substorm. This is when charged particles build up and eventually have to release. And this is what happens. This is not an all-night event. So it makes it a little challenging to plan how to see the Northern Lights in the Adirondacks, or I should say the mid-latitudes, which the Adirondacks are. In the upper latitudes, the Arctic, Northern Lights are almost a daily event and don't require the planning and understanding as much as when you're down this far south.
So two of the most spectacular shows in 2024 were in May on the 10th and 11th, and October 10th and 11th. Did you get out there and see those?
I sure did. But let me tell you, the issue that we have in the Adirondacks, or maybe the Northeast, are clouds. And last night was a perfect example to tell all of you that there was a surprise Northern Lights show last night. And most of us didn't get to see it because of these perpetual clouds that we've been having. So on the two biggest storms in 2024 that you mentioned, May 10th and 11th, for me personally, it was mainly cloudy. I got to see maybe 3 minutes of it and got a couple photos. I was up in the Lake George area. And what I did see was spectacular. The lights were actually, they weren't even northern lights. They were southern lights and eastern and western lights. The whole sky was just flashing green and red, but clouds quickly moved in. Fortunately, October worked out the opposite. When the lights started going crazy at 7:15 on October 10th, it was cloudy. It was so strong the Northern Lights showed through the clouds, but eventually midnight, it cleared up, and then it went right through to the early morning. So I did get to experience the October 10th, 11th one, and it was beautiful.
Great. So I'm going to show another Northern Lights photo. Well, Northern Lights photo here.
I'm hoping that people that are on this webinar got to see the October 10th and 11th one. This was 3:30 in the morning, overlooking Great Sacandaga Lake. And this was
That was
yet
on
another
October. Is this the October one?
October 11th.
Yep.
Yep. This was another example of the peak of a substorm where the charged particles just sort of snap back after being charged up so much. And this really lasts a couple minutes only. It's not, the event was all night, but it would like get strong and then dim, strong. The actual peak of this was not this way all night.
So, how closely do you follow the science behind excuse me, sorry about that. How closely do you follow the science behind the Northern Lights? And, does that help you get out there and photograph them, know when they're going to be appearing?
So I'll tell you that as a nature photographer, um, all of us always find that a deeper understanding of our subjects always benefits us for photography. Whether it's birds and understanding bird behavior and where they live, moose where they could be found, wildflowers, just about anything. Having a good science understanding of your subject helps, and certainly that's the case with the Northern Lights. Again, when you live in the mid latitudes of New York and you're not in the polar regions where you just go out every night. So, I learned a lot with obviously the web, social media, YouTube videos. There's just so much information out there. The actual NOAA website has tutorials. And the more you learn, the more you have the ability to forecast when they might happen, what time of night to go out. And again, we're always dealing with clouds or possibly the bright full moon. So um, there's a lot to learn. And I break it down into three things as a viewer of the Northern Lights and the Adirondacks. First, having awareness that something happened on the sun, solar activity that would cause the Northern Lights to be strong enough to be viewed in our area. The second thing is tracking when that event happens on the sun. It's 93 million miles for those particles to reach Earth, and many times they don't, they miss Earth. So there's information when we can get from satellites that helps us with that. And then third, this thing I mentioned about substorms and substorm timing, because for us in the mid latitudes, the substorms are the main event to really see the best of the Northern Lights, and they don't last long. So there's a lot of information on substorms that you can read about. You have a chart, I think, that would be helpful. Yes. So I wanted to share this with everyone. There's many different things people look at, but I sort of made this chart up that helps me determine when do I think there's going to be something to see in the Adirondack region. I would suggest to people to first follow a group like the Aurora Hunters New York, if you're okay with being on Facebook. There's many experts that post updates when the Northern Lights are going to be visible, and you can ask questions. I happen to be an admin on it, so my presence is there. Also, people talk about apps, phone apps, and there's many. The the best one that most people like is worded on the left there, Space Weather Live. It's an app, but you can also go to their website. And so what we look for is data that shows stronger solar winds. It's all about the solar wind, which are charged particles reaching the Earth from the sun. I can get into this a little more, but we look for wind speed, density, and the strength of the solar wind with the numbers on the left. And on the right, there's another upper right, there's another metric that people like to use called hemispheric power. Now, this is all data, which doesn't necessarily guarantee something's happening. So a lot of us will look at a webcam a little bit further north, and you know what? If you see there's Northern Lights happening live in northern Maine, there's a chance it could reach a little bit further south in the Adirondack. So webcams are a popular way to look and see is something actually happening? And then the bottom right, which is a whole discussion in of itself, is called the GOES magnetometer, which shows when a substorm could happen. So this is the type of stuff, Mike, that when you get to the point of wanting to really on your own without relying on others to tell you when to go, you study the northern lights. This is not really necessary for everyone on the call. You can join a group like Aurora Hunters, and people will experts and moderators will tell us when looks like there's something happening, and I would suggest that as a start.
Do you have any advice for things to stay away from when you're viewing the northern lights, things that might be misleading?
Well, yeah, certainly one of the things that's happened, and I think it's because of those big May and October storms, is that the news media jumped on this as a way of grabbing attention. And there's so many news outlets that are almost daily publishing stuff online in Google and so forth, saying Northern Lights to be viewed in 17 states. Some of them that are doing this are Forbes, CBS News, ABC, even ESPN, and a new one for me, marthastewart.com was running Northern Lights. Now, they're getting some data, forecast data from NOAA, but most of it's not even reliable. And what happens is they get people to grab the article, and then there's all sorts of boxes and called clickbait, hidden ads to click on. So I would stay away from that. I would definitely look for anything that uses basically the NOAA and NASA satellite data. That's the way we really know whether something's going to happen soon, and that's what I would suggest.
Okay, great. So we have a photograph here that I'm going to show that um, is a collage, and it has 24 photos of northern lights from last year.
And let me tell you a little bit about this. So, as we've been talking, the May 10th box and the October 11th box were all night events for those who were able to escape the clouds. A lot of these boxes, though, were the substorms that I was talking about that you sort of track, and they start up and they last maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, maybe a half hour. The December 2nd one, as an example, in the upper left corner, that lasted about 3 minutes. So that's the challenge of the Northern Lights, is it's not like you just go out and there they are. These substorms can happen quick, and you have to be able to, with information from people on Aurora Hunters or there's many other Facebook sites and groups. You don't have all night, and that's the thing where we live. Nevertheless, if you study it and you do it, they're just awesome to see the sky break out and red pillars and green arcs. It is a spectacular sight to see.
Great. So I think now we're going to take some questions from the audience, and we've had some submitted already.
Okay.
So you had one from James, and he was asking, how do you find moose?
Well, as I said before, so the first moose, someone told me about it, which isn't a great answer, but the others were luck and being in the right place. But seriously, how to answer the question, it helps to know about moose and their habitat, where they live, and what they eat. So in spring, late spring, early summer, moose rely on aquatic vegetation. And we know that, like many animals, they prefer to be out at first light or end of the day at sunset, not in the middle of the day. So, if you like to paddle, if you like to walk into remote ponds and lakes without a lot of development, that's the best way to try to see a moose in the Adirondacks. Also, knowing what part of the Adirondacks, moose are being seen throughout the Adirondack region, but there are still areas that have higher populations than others, somewhat dependent on the food supply and whether the land might have been timbered. The DEC shares that the biggest moose population is really up in Clinton and Franklin County, so the northern part of the Adirondacks. Areas below Chateauguay and Chazy Lake are known to be a big spot. The up around Paul Smith's up to Malone, that area has a lot of moose sightings. Um, so, where you go, you may see a moose just about anywhere, even on the Northway. But if you're really serious about looking for it and you were planning a vacation, a camping trip, or a getaway, if it were me, I would be spending time up in the, north of Saranac Lake area.
So we had a question from Roy from Minnesota, and
Okay.
he's going to be visiting the Adirondacks for 3 or 4 days in the fall or early summer. And there's going to be a full moon, and he was just wondering if you could recommend some locations, that would be photogenic where he could, go and get some nice images.
So, depending on where he is in the Adirondacks, being such a big region, if he wants to photograph, the full moon rising, either over a body of water or over the mountains, hopefully he's considering the high peaks area for the mountains, Keene Valley up to Lake Placid. But for water, you know, especially obviously you got to be looking east, right, for the rising full moon. You know, there's just so much abundant water in the Route 30 corridor from Speculator to uh, Indian Lake to Long Lake to Tupper Lake. So, you know, that area would just give such a plentiful opportunities for being on the water as the moon rises. Mountains or lakes would be the first choice, I guess, for him to consider.
Great. So we had another question from Don Simmons, and he wanted to know what size lens do you typically use for photographing river otter and birds?
So I have, and a lot of my photographer friends consider a 500 millimeter to be, required for birds and wildlife. Years ago, when I said 500 millimeter, and I still have it, it's this mammoth lens that is so big and bulky, and it takes beautiful pictures, but it's heavy. In more recent years, a lot of camera manufacturers have been making zoom lenses that go out to 500, 600. They're like 100 to 500, 100 to 600. They're hand holdable. Whether it's a camera manufacturer, Sony, Canon, or Nikon, or a different third-party lens like by Sigma. That's what all of my friends and myself use, is definitely consider 500 the minimum for wildlife in the Adirondacks. Hopefully that answers his question.
Okay. We had another question here from Wilson. He said you strive for clean and simple backgrounds. He wanted to know if you pay attention to those backgrounds first and then compose your subject, or vice versa.
It's a little bit of both. I mean, honestly, the technology, even though today's autofocus technology is really incredible, it still grabs an object better if it's not got a lot of distracting branches and stuff behind. So some of it is pre-planning because you want the camera to focus properly. Um, The other thing is, yes, over the years, and I learned this with my early bird photography and the friends I had in Florida who always strived for those simple backgrounds. It's a personal preference. I happen to like a smooth out of focus background so the subject stands out. When I take a photo and it's got, tree branches and sticks sticking out of the head of an animal or bird, it's not ideal for me personally. I do not artificially change my backgrounds. In this day and age of AI and digital manipulation, that may be a question that people think about, but no, I strive for natural backgrounds. And if the background is distant enough, it will just be out of focus on its own. I hope that answers his question.
Think so. So this is a question from Catherine. She wanted to know, how do you keep your camera so steady when shooting in a canoe or a kayak? I know that's a tricky thing to do.
So, well, many years ago, camera manufacturers introduced image stabilization, first in the lenses and then eventually in the bodies themselves, and now both. That helps tremendously. That doesn't freeze the image from moving, but it does freeze your hand movement. And also, when I'm in a canoe or kayak, I tend to try to stay along the shore and even wedge my boat into vegetation on the shore to steady it. That is so much better than being out in the middle of the water with the boat rocking back and forth. There are times I've given up photographing loons when I was out in the middle because the boat movement was too much. The hand holding part, that image stabilization helps. It can't help for the boat moving.
And we had a question here from Tina M, and she wanted to know, what were you shooting the moose video with? What kind of camera or video? Was that a still camera or video camera?
So, yes. So nowadays, basically all of the mirrorless and digital SLRs offer both functions. I don't really know of anyone that uses a video camera per se. I don't even know much if how much they're around anymore. Um, all of our cameras can do both, and they, at first it was 1080p high resolution, and now it's 4K and 8K. So it's nice to have one camera that can do both, especially, as a photographer, your major investment is in lenses, not so much the camera body. So if you've got a camera body with, very expensive lenses that can do both, that's ideal.
What camera do you use?
I've stuck with Canon, and I currently use two different Canon mirrorless cameras, the R7 for birds and wildlife, and the R5 for northern lights. I stuck with Canon because my investment in the lenses is there, and I don't want to start all over. But I'll tell you, most of my photographer friends who um, started later than I did really prefer Sony, the Sony brand, with the quality of their sensors, and their lenses are cheaper too. So I'm not one that necessarily endorses one or the other. I could just share with you what my peers do, and they like Sony more.
Oh, okay. We had a question here from Lori L, and she says, first, thank you so much for your contributions to understanding the aurora. It is because of you that I was able to see it from my front yards 4 times last year.
Oh, Lori, thank you so much.
And
Thank
then,
you.
so she says, when taking pictures of the northern lights, the lights always appear grainy, but everything else is crisp. I'm using my Android phone. What can I do to improve this?
Um, well, first would be a question would be the settings. The longer the time exposure, the longer you're going to be able to gather light. So I'm hoping that you're setting it for 5 or 10 seconds and holding the camera steady. And I'm talking still photos, not video. So the more light, the less noise. You can use noise reduction. There's different programs probably available on the phone that you can take the photo and reduce some of the grain. And that's we all do that with night photography, reduce that grain. So I would look for an app that supplements your phone camera that you could take the picture in and reduce some of that grain. And again, make sure that you're doing as long a time exposure as you can.
Okay. So, I had a question now about Northern Lights, and this is for me. I just wanted to know, you know, so we're in the middle of this solar cycle supposedly, but it seems like it's slowed down. Have you, and there haven't been as many sightings recently. Have you been doing any research on this to see if, there's potential for more in the next few months?
So here's the science on it, Mike. I think that scientists have said we are now past the max, but years and years of data suggest that the year or two after the solar max is reached can be just as good as the max itself. So I think that's encouraging. I think everything relates to sunspots, and how many sunspots there are is where the storms, geomagnetic storms, come from. I know last year there were quiet periods, but right now I think clouds are our biggest challenge. Um, I've missed 4 or 5 Northern Lights displays since January 1st, including January 1st, all because of clouds. So, and last year of the 24, I really didn't have by first until February. So I'm still encouraged that nothing's slowing down, other than the fact that not only clouds, but even as far east as I am, I'm getting the tail end of these lake effect snow bands from Lake Ontario. I can't complain if anyone's on the call getting barraged with feet of snow from Lake Ontario. I'm sorry. I hope it ends for you. We're getting the tail end, but it's making it consistently cloudy all the time here.
Is there a better time of year for viewing the Northern Lights? Winter as opposed to summer, or does that?
So, so there's two things, especially if you live in the polar regions. The more night sky you have, the better. So obviously, when it's summer for us in the middle of summer and it doesn't get dark till 10 o'clock and gets light at 5, we have less darkness to view it. So that's the key, is the longer the night sky. There's no correlation to when sunspots appear on the sun and churn up electromagnetic energy to a season. I don't want to get that technical, but there is something about March and September during the equinoxes that somehow the way the Earth's axis is with the sun, that it does bump things up a bit. But if you're talking seasonality, it's just a matter of how much night sky you get without the sun.
So we had a question about your trail cam videos, and our we just had quite. I guess James just wants to know more about them. Can you provide us any more details on them? And so I guess maybe first tell us what they are, and for people who are not familiar, and then you know feel free to share. I know people that have trail cams don't necessarily want to share where they are for obvious reasons, but
Yeah, my trail cams are in the Adirondacks. No, seriously, I use 4 different trail cams with my love of moose and other wildlife to try to capture animals, because they're so hard to see just walking around. I have them on public land that is within the wild forest, not wilderness, so they're allowed. The DEC. I share my moose videos with the DEC biologists. Um, I don't go on private land, so that would be a thing to consider. I do have them locked up because I've had theft before when I initially tried them. The use of trail cams tells you how hard it is to see wildlife in the Adirondacks, though. I will check my cameras maybe once every 4 weeks. And if I have one moose walking by in 4 weeks, um, that's that's good. So you could stand up there for 30 days and nights and might not see anything. Um, and also the trail cams are have their limitations in darkness. They only record, at least the ones I have, only record in black and white versus color. But they are, I've recorded so many different moose and moose calves and bulls and in basically the southern Adirondacks, not even the area north that I suggested. It's they're fun to check and see what you've got. It's feel like a little kid, looking, oh, what do I got? So yeah, trail cams, just be aware of possible theft, be aware of putting them where they're legal, and also the weather, making sure that wind doesn't kick off the trees right next to it.
Great. Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions
Okay.
right now, but is there anything else you want to bring up or mention? You don't have to, but if there's something that was in the back of your mind you wanted to talk about, feel free.
I guess I'd just like to conclude on the Northern Lights, because I know people were tuning into this hoping to gain, the best insight on how to see them. And I made it seem like they are challenging to see, and they are, especially in our area. Substorms are limited timing wise. You almost don't even have time to go out and see them. So instead of becoming an expert, not everyone wants to do that. I really would suggest, whether it's Facebook or something else, that some of these expertise groups on the Northern Lights, especially for New York, there's a couple in New York, a couple in New England. If you join them and you stay tuned to them, you're going to end up getting information that eventually it's going to help you uh, see them. I know it was Lori thanked me for that, and that was from my post on the Aurora Hunters of New York. And Jen Zook runs that out of the southern tier of New York, and she has really updated a lot of tutorials, and she's very good at giving people a heads up when it's time to go out and look. She calls it go time. So yeah, if you can, I didn't know anything about the Northern Lights until 2 years ago, and look at all I've seen. It's you can learn a little bit and get advice from others. So that's, I would say, just hope for clear skies.
Well, we did talking about Northern Lights prompted another question, and this is an equipment one. They want Shane, he wants to know what lens do you use for Northern Lights?
So I use a what's called a fast wide angle. Fast meaning it allows a lot of light in. So people for the Northern Lights, for the Milky Way, stars and all that, basically want to have a lens that at least is a f2.8. That allows enough light to get in to record. So if you've got a zoom that's a typical 25 to 100 f 5.6, that's going to be a struggle to get light. So you may have to purchase a faster lens, an f2.8. In terms of the wide angle aspect, that ends up being personal. Mine's a 28 millimeter, which sometimes isn't wide enough, but it's what I've got. And I've got a 28 millimeter f1.4, which allows in a lot of light. But that's the camera. I'm going to tell you that most of the people in the Aurora Hunters group and myself use our phones a lot at times too, putting it on the night mode in 10 seconds. And I've got some beautiful phone images of the Northern Lights, and many do.
We got another question. They keep coming in now.
Okay.
Want to squeeze them in before the deadline. So this is from Ron. He wanted to know if you have a favorite non-Adirondack place to go.
Uh, well, let's see. I've traveled a lot, but I'll try to. Um, You could run through the list of the national parks. I'll always have great memories of Yellowstone and Grand Teton. I've been to Florida partially due to family visits, dozens and dozens of times. Um, I've done the California coast for 12 days. I am partial actually to New England, being next to the Adirondacks. I like with my equipment. Sometimes flying is a hassle with big lenses and camera gear and the fragile aspect of it. I love the New England coast, and Acadia National Park is certainly a favorite for myself and my family. I love neighboring Vermont. Um, I love New Hampshire, and yeah, I mean, Nate, if you love nature, you can find it anywhere. You mentioned that I live just south of the park in Saratoga County, and technically the Adirondack blue line is, I think, 19 miles from my house, but you know, below that there are areas that are almost as wild and just as beautiful, and sometimes have an occasional moose wandering through it. So you can really find nature in many places that aren't as dramatic as the national parks.
Great. I think that's all the questions we have today for you, Jeff. Thanks for coming out and talking to us. This has been fascinating. The photographs are amazing, and I think people really pay attention more to them when they appear in the magazine and see your name below them. They'll know a little bit more about you. And thanks everybody for attending. So we're gonna close the webinar now, and that you can.
Thank you, Mike. Thank
Go
you
ahead.
so much for inviting me to do this. This was pleasurable. I hope I gave some advice that will help some people look for the aurora. And thanks, Tracy, and the rest of the staff at Adirondack Explorer.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jeff.
You're welcome.